Imagine waking up one morning to the smell of smoke. Not the kind that drifts lazily from a neighbor's fireplace, but thick, choking, black smoke, the kind that swallows entire skylines whole. You step outside and realize the city you were born in, the palace that defined your world, the market where your grandfather once sold grain, all of it is gone, reduced to ash. And somewhere in the distance, drums. The kind of drums that mean it's already too late to run. This wasn't a nightmare. This happened over and over again throughout human history. Entire kingdoms, empires that took centuries to build, were wiped out in a matter of days. Today, we're going to talk about when kingdoms burned. And trust me, once you understand what really happened in these moments, you will never look at civilization the same way again. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, this is the place where we dig deep into history, pull out the stories that your textbooks left on the cutting room floor, and figure out what they actually mean for us today. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an episode, because we post every single week and the topics only get more intense from here. Now, let's get into it. When we talk about kingdoms burning, most people immediately picture war. Armies clashing on open fields, generals on horseback, catapults launching fireballs over stone walls. And yes, that was absolutely part of it. But the real story is far more layered and, honestly, far more disturbing than simple conquest. Because the most powerful kingdoms in history didn't just burn from outside pressure. Many of them collapsed from within, and that's the part that should send a chill down your spine. Let's start with the fall of the Bronze Age civilizations around 1200 BCE. This is one of the most catastrophic collapses in the ancient world, and historians debate exactly what caused it. In the span of just a few decades, virtually every major civilization in the Eastern Mediterranean either disappeared entirely or was crippled beyond recovery. We're talking about the Mycenaean Greeks, the Hittite Empire, the Canaanite cities, Ugarit, Cyprus, all of it gone. Ugarit, one of the most prosperous trading cities of its time, was burned so completely that it was never rebuilt. Archaeologists found a clay tablet in the ruins of Ugarit that had been baked in the very fire that destroyed the city. On it was a desperate letter from the king saying that enemy ships had been spotted, that his troops were away, that the city was alone. That tablet was the last thing ever written from Ugarit. The city burned the same day. When you hold that image in your mind, a king writing his final words, while his city falls, history stops being something in a textbook and starts being something that actually happened to real people. What brought down the Bronze Age? Scholars point to a combination of climate change that caused droughts and famine, internal political instability, disruption of trade routes, and a mysterious group known only as the Sea Peoples who swept through the region like a wave of destruction that nobody could fully stop. Sound familiar? A convergence of crises that snowball into something no single government can manage. The civilizations of the Bronze Age weren't primitive. They had international trade networks, diplomatic correspondence, specialized labor, complex bureaucracies. And it all burned. The lesson buried in those ashes is that complexity without resilience is fragility dressed up in expensive clothes. Now let's fast forward to something a little closer to the cultural memory of many of us, the fall of Rome. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476, it wasn't a single dramatic moment where barbarians rushed through the gates and everything turned to rubble overnight. It was a slow, grinding, agonizing process that took centuries. But there were moments of fire. Literal fire. In 410 CE, the Visigoths under Alaric sacked Rome for the first time in 800 years. People across the known world were stunned. Saint Jerome, who was living in Bethlehem at the time, wrote that when he heard the news, he was struck dumb. Rome, the eternal city, the city that many believed would stand until the end of time, had been sacked. And then in 455 CE, the Vandals came and did it again, stripping the city of its treasures with almost mechanical efficiency. But even after both of those moments, Rome didn't immediately turn to ash. It lingered, hollowed out from corruption, military overextension, economic debasement, political instability, and a loss of civic identity that made citizens less and less willing to defend something they no longer believed in. That is perhaps the most haunting detail of all. Kingdoms don't always burn because a stronger enemy shows up. Sometimes they burn because the people inside them stopped caring whether they survived. And then there's the Mongol destruction of Baghdad in 1258, a moment so catastrophic that Islamic scholars called it the end of the world as they knew it. Baghdad at that time was the intellectual heart of the planet. The House of Wisdom, which had been collecting and translating the knowledge of the ancient world for centuries, storing manuscripts and books on astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and philosophy, all of it was thrown into the Tigris River. The river reportedly ran black with ink and red with blood. Hulagu Khan's forces killed somewhere between 200,000 and 800,000 people in a matter of days. The Abbasid Caliphate, which had lasted over 500 years, was extinguished in a single week. What makes this moment so haunting is what was lost and never recovered. Centuries of accumulated human knowledge, the kind of knowledge that doesn't exist anywhere else, just gone, drowned in a river. When kingdoms burn, they don't just take lives. They take ideas. They take possibilities. They take futures that never get to happen. Even in more recent centuries, the pattern holds. The Aztec Empire, one of the most sophisticated civilizations in the Americas, burned in 1521 after Herne and Cortés and his alliance of indigenous rivals laid siege to Tenochtitlan. By the time it was over, the great city built on a lake, connected by causeways, larger and arguably more advanced than any European city of its time, was in ruins. The Aztecs called the destruction the day when flowers wept. Entire systems of knowledge, calendars, religious texts, and historical records were destroyed in the aftermath. Cortés himself reportedly stood over the rubble and wept, not out of remorse, but because he was overwhelmed by the scale of what had just been conquered. He had just burned something irreplaceable, and he knew it even in his moment of triumph. So what does all of this mean? Why does it matter that we sit here in the 21st century and learn about kingdoms that burned thousands of years ago? Because the forces that burned them are not ancient. They are not relics. They are the same forces moving through the world right now: climate disruption, political fragmentation, the concentration of power without accountability, the slow erosion of the civic bonds that make a society want to survive. Every single empire that collapsed told itself it was different, that it was too big, too powerful, too essential to the world to fall. Rome thought it was eternal. Baghdad thought it was the center of civilization. Ugarit thought the sea would protect it. They were all wrong. And the only thing that separates a kingdom that burns from one that endures is the awareness, the uncomfortable, urgent awareness that collapse is always possible and always closer than it looks. The most important thing history teaches us is not dates. It's not the names of kings or the details of battles. It's pattern recognition. It's the ability to look at something falling apart and recognize the shape of the fall, because you've seen that shape before in the pages of a different story from a different century. The kingdoms that burned weren't destroyed by fate. They were destroyed by decisions, by the decision to ignore warning signs, to prioritize short-term power over long-term stability, to believe that what has always worked will always work. We are not immune. No civilization ever is. But we are fortunate enough to have the record, to have the clay tablets, the ruins, the accounts written by survivors who watched everything burn and somehow found the will to write it down so that someone, maybe us, might learn something. That is the greatest act of defiance against destruction that has ever existed. Not armies, not walls, words. The decision to remember. If this video hit different for you, I want to know. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Which kingdoms fall do you think had the most devastating ripple effects on history? I genuinely read every comment, and I respond to as many as I can. If you want to go even deeper on any of the civilizations we talked about today, I've linked some related videos in the description that will take you down some incredible rabbit holes. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that bell. There are people out there who watch this channel every week and describe it as the thing that made them fall back in love with history. And honestly, that means everything to me. Thank you for spending your time here. I'll see you in the next one.